So I have given up officially in 2025 on digital productivity. I still use a little bit of it in very specific focused ways, but I am now 100% analog, and I think it might have been the best decision that I have ever made. And I want to talk you through and I want to walk you through this, but the TLDR of this whole thing is you should absolutely take matters into your own hands. All of this is leading up to my 2025 planner pack release, which is I'm jamming in all of the productivity stuff, systems, and templates I've ever made. Also with all of the sermon and message prep templates I have, because they all belong together. So we're going to get into this content. And first, I want to just describe to you what my own digital history, what my own productivity history might be inside of all of this. Many of us always try to find this perfect productivity system. And for me, it really started when I finished college and I was working in campus ministry before I went to seminary. That was the first time I realized I actually had a lot of stuff to keep up with. And at the same time, the internet had really just gotten popular. This was 2005. Folks were blogging about a lot of things, and I began to find out that other people like to think and talk about productivity. And so this is the era, it's called from 2005 to 2011. So this was all throughout working in campus ministry and then my time in seminary. And when I was in seminary, I worked almost full time between a couple of different jobs. Almost all of them were in ministry, and this was the era of the notebooks. All of the notebooks. I had so many things going on, and I began to develop my whole idea of a working notebook at this time. So I had my notebook, which is where I wrote down my schedule every day, and I just took notes on the things that I was doing, and it worked really well. The breaking point of it was I had too many notebooks. I was trying to have a notebook for this, a notebook for this, and a notebook for this. And that's when I think it began to break down. Now, the second era is what I'm going to call my Evernote era. Now, I have been on Evernote since probably 2011, 2012. I will never get off Evernote because my $5 a month plan that I have grandfathers me into so many resources. I think I would be in the ultra premium, whatever they call that category, Evernote now. I know I checked a couple of years ago and I'd be spending like $50 a month to have all the things that I have now. But I heard Michael Hyatt talk about creating just a daily journal and daily template in Evernote and remaking that every single day. And so that's how I managed the first church I was working in as a pastor full-time. I managed some other stuff inside of there. I had notebooks for sermon preparation and that sort of stuff. That's when I developed my first sermon worksheet. And so I generally had a paper notebook for sermon work. And then I had my Evernote file and that I kind of tried to manage and run everything. But it would just have hiccups because I didn't always have Evernote open in front of me. And I didn't want to pull out my phone and always be on a digital device in front of people. That will be a running thread. So the second era, 2012, 2014, is the Evernote era. The second era is what I'm going to call the very first day sheet era. I made my first day sheet around 2014. They were starting to become really popular at the time, and I bought a few other people's tools, and I got to the point to where I could begin to create my own. And that's when Productive Pastor started off. In fact, a lot of Productive Pastor is based off of my day sheet. That was the very first thing I developed and gave away. Some version of it has probably been downloaded close to 10,000 times by now. But I just kind of ran myself off the day sheet. I would print out a bunch of them. I would shove them inside of a notebook, and I would just try to go about my day. But the only problem was, if I had it in the wrong notebook, I was just out of luck in that moment. And I still was trying to keep up with multiple notebooks because I felt like I needed to segment and break this thing off differently. So I would have my sermon notebook, and then I would have my day sheets, and I was still kind of using Evernote and some other digital tools at this point in time. And I just never had all my stuff with me at the same time. That was the first beginning frustration, was I never had all my stuff with me at the same time. And so to fix that, we're going to call this fourth era the anything goes era. This was when I began trying every single productivity tool there was out there. I was using Todoist. I would use Evernote. I've used Notion. I went and started using Trello. I mean, every single thing that was an app at that point in time, I tried to integrate myself into it. This was also when I began working with a team, and I realized I need a tool that all of us can see and use at the same time. But I was just chasing apps. I was chasing the next big thing. I was chasing what I thought would help me. And it just kind of turned into absolute chaos. So the fourth era, the anything goes era, 2016, 2019. And then in 2019, I finally realized that I like an analog workflow. By then, I had started to develop more templates beyond my day sheet and my sermon planning worksheet. And I wanted to go so hardcore into a digital solution that I could bring and just keep, as long as I had it with me, I knew I was safe. And so I bought the cheapest iPad they made and the cheapest Apple Pencil and said, Chad, for 1 year, you're just going to give this a go and see if you can do this. And I used it inside of an app called GoodNotes. And I liked it a decent amount. I ran GoodNotes with Trello using all of my analog templates and then just inserting blank pages from 2019 to 2023. I have a massive amount of archive of those sorts of things. And I liked it, and it worked really, really well, but it started breaking down in 2023 for a couple of reasons. Number one, GoodNotes became really sloppy as an app. There's a joke now on the subreddit for GoodNotes that it should just be called bug reports. I like the idea that I could be on my iPad and then I could open up my desktop or my laptop because I'm a 3-computer guy, and I could find the same thing anywhere, but it wasn't wanting to sync and update, and especially because I was writing all my sermons using my sermon templates in GoodNotes. It'd be really frustrating when the time came to write my manuscript and kind of get the final stuff nailed down, and I would have to spend 30 minutes getting my iPad and my desktop to connect. And then also one time I went somewhere for like a week, and we're out in the middle of nowhere kind of, and I got there and I realized that I had forgotten to bring my Apple Pencil with me. And I was absolutely shut down. The only thing I had to write on was my Bible. And GoodNotes does not work with your finger. You can type into it, but it really frustrated me. I was like, okay, Chad, you're gonna have to finally fix this. And around that same time, I realized that what I had learned and why I value the GoodNotes era was that's when I created my concept of the working notebook, that you can keep every single thing in one place, and that templates can give you a level of customization and the benefits of a planner and the benefits of these software pieces. I had a lot of friends that were super big into bullet journaling. I never liked that, but I liked the concept of how you could move things kind of from day to day down the line, and people would start coming up with all these interesting ways to plan, quarters and weeks and months and days and all that sort of stuff. And so in 2024, I did a couple of things. One, I released the first template planner pack, and I'd had all these templates before, and I realized that, Chad, just print these things out. Just print them out. I was looking at how much it costs to have somebody else print it out and have things bound together, all that. And I realized, Chad, you own a comb binder because you're that level of nerd. So why don't you just print out what you need, stick some blank sheets in there with it, and just print out your own working notebook using all of the templates and such that you have. And so that's the whole history of the digital. And I started doing that full time around a year ago. Beginning of 2025 is when I finally committed to it. I stopped messing around with GoodNotes. I really rarely use Trello anymore at all because Trello, they've locked stuff down so much to where you have to pay money to really get into those features. And it's great for managing complex projects and that sort of stuff, but I realized I can manage it just as easy on paper and just get more out of it. So that's the full journey. Next, I want to talk with you about the failure points of digital. So that failure point, and so much of it lives inside of this paradigm that I've talked about on the podcast before, I've written emails about, I've written about it online, is that productivity, ultimately, you're an artist or an engineer. What I mean by that is if you're an engineer, you need things to be super linear. They're going to look perfect. It's going to be very A, B, C, D. And for people like that, productivity works great. You know, those are the folks that they can pull off so much with digital tools. They'll be super into the bullet journal, that sort of a thing. You know, engineers tend to manage productivity in a very focused, very clean, and very linear way. The other part of the paradigm is the artist. And that's actually how I got into productivity in the first place, was learning about daily routines of writers and artists and other creators. And if you've been watching my videos or following me anywhere, there's visual stuff online. You can tell that, Chad, you kind of thrive inside of chaos. That to an artist, it's about striking when the iron is hot. That it's about realizing that you're going to have some hyper focus at times, and that the biggest value to any productivity system, if you live inside of the artist paradigm, is you've got to be able to access your stuff. That's where people go south. One of the notebook strategies I kept for a long time when I was still flirting back and forth between digital and analog productivity, which I always wanted to. I always wanted to be back into analog, was this idea of what's called a traveler's notebook, which is just those simple Muji A5 notebooks, which I talk about all the time and I love. Inside of a leather folder and using elastic bands, you can keep 4 or 5 or 6 of them in the same big notebook. I love that. If I didn't value my templates so much, I could live in that world 100%. But there's so much of a value in templates. There's a value in regularity. It's a value of a system that you know works and that you have the ability to refine and iterate over time. That's why I just cannot stay locked into a digital tool, even if it gives me some of the templating power, because of the failure point is ultimately you're relying on a device. If your devices get old, they get clunky, they're not holding battery charge later. Sometimes in ministry, we're in situations to where it's just not appropriate to pull out your freaking phone. Or even an iPad. It just is too distracting. I would be in the middle of like these really, kind of complicated conversations with families, planning a funeral, and I'd pull out my iPad and my Apple Pencil, and they'd start asking me questions about the app I was using. Oh, wow, what are you doing? That looks really... I want to remove the digital piece, because whenever I'm relying on a digital tool for productivity, I always have a bit of focus in the back that's absolutely lacking, and I'm always going to be struggling to overcome that. So that's the failure point. The win point here, the win point where things change, is the working notebook strategy. That you have one place where everything goes, your planning, your productivity, your time management, all that kind of stuff, and your sermon preparation stuff, because you can get this all into one notebook. And then the templates, and then rather than trying to come up with some complicated printing solution, or I even looked at what would it look like for me to bundle all of these things together and try to sell this as a physical notebook, because somebody else is selling a planner out there called the Productive Pastor Planner, and it's not me. I've heard from several of you about this over the last couple of years. But also is this value of customization. Remember at the very beginning of this episode, I said you can take matters into your own hands. And ever since I've ever released templates, I've always told people, hey, these aren't the end all be all. What works for me might not work for you, but use my template and learn how you can modify it and make it work for you in your ministry context and what that looks like. My first day sheet was literally a copy of like 3 different day sheets I had bought from people, and they were not in ministry at all. And I started asking ministry questions. It's like, well, what do I need for ministry? What do I need for this? The sermon planning worksheet was the exact same way. People were selling all these amazing preaching courses 10, 15 years ago, and I found a handful of things that always worked for me, and so I created a system to make sure I always filled that sort of thing out. Inside of it is these are tools you can use, and you can go to the show notes, and I will give you both my most current day sheet and the most current sermon prep worksheet for free. Just give me your email address, and I'll send that thing to you. But if we begin to understand, okay, I've got these templates, I've refined them for what works for me. Some of them might be from another person. Some of them might be from things I've created myself. I've got a book back here somewhere of somebody who actually bundled together tons of different of these resources, put my day sheet in there, mailed me a copy of it for free. It's really awesome. I need to go find that. I just remembered that as I was recording this video. I need to go check that out again because it was really, really cool. And so this is what I do now. At the beginning of every single month, I go and I have a PDF I've made now because I know exactly what of my sheets and how many of them I am going to need in a normal month. And I dropped all of the same PDF templates that are part of the planner pack. And I'm not preaching weekly right now. I typically do preach once a month. And so I put at least one sermon's worth of worksheets for prepping out a sermon in my working notebook each month. And I ordered them literally just, I start off with the month, and then I order them by the week and by the day. And so I have my weekly preview worksheet, which I swear is an amazing tool. And that's really the foundation of my productivity tips now is those 20, 30 minutes I spend on Sunday planning out the next week. And then I put 4 of my day sheets in there. I put a couple of my meeting worksheets in there. I have a weekly review worksheet that goes in there every single week. And I print out sometimes 4 to 6 weeks of those. And there's 25 or 30 templates I've made over the years that are all part of the planner pack. And when I look at what the next month ahead might mean, I might print out a few of those because I've got a very specific thing going on. I put a whole batch of my sermon planning worksheets in there. And then I stick in 4 or 5 pages of extra paper. I pull out the comb binder and I make a notebook. And right now I've been carrying, if you're watching this on video, this is the one that I've been carrying with me for the last like 9 months. This is my working notebook. And what I love is I can stick stuff inside of here. I can put pages inside here and you keep up with. I can stick Post-it notes in as part of my process. And I love how I can move Post-it notes from day to day if I'm working on projects. I've got a project planning worksheet that has a landing zone specifically on there for Post-it notes. I've made new templates this year that I've never given away about developing projects and running projects, that sort of thing, so much to where I might not really even need Trello that much. And then if there's things from the past week, the past month, if there's notes I've made on stuff, if there's anything I might feel is particularly important, when I build my next notebook out, I just include those pages in there as well. And so in some ways, I've got things as I'm flipping through my working notebook right now that might be 7 or 8 or 9 months old, and I include them because I'm still referring back to them. And so this is the end of it here. If this sounds interesting to you, if you are curious about this, make sure you go to the show notes, or if you're watching this video somewhere, I'm going to make sure this link is in the description of that video. On Thanksgiving, that's a Black Friday, Thanksgiving weekend sale, whatever you want to call it. I am selling my entire productivity template system, including the sermon planning worksheets, all in one big, huge bundle as a course. And there's also tons of video content walking through every single one of the sheets there. There's a video about how I literally build out this comb-bound working notebook every single month. There's new sheets that I've never given away, never sold before. They're included as part of this. There's videos on those new sheets, how I use those new sheets. And if you bought the planner pack a couple of years ago or the sermon pack a couple of years ago, you don't have to rebuy this. I'm going to drop all of that new content into the Podia link where that course lived already. So you get it all if you've had it before, but if you've never jumped on this before and you're frustrated with your productivity systems, you're frustrated with your templates and what has worked and what hasn't worked, I've got you. So there's a wait list that starts. It's a 10-day wait list where I'm also giving you 10 days of emails specifically about the working notebook strategy and what does it mean to create your perfect planner, because it doesn't exist elsewhere, but it is inside of your head. So make sure you check this stuff out. So that's it, y'all. That is my 2025 analog workflow. And if you're curious about conversations like this, make sure to subscribe to the podcast. I also write regular emails for Productive Pastor, specifically about ministry productivity and the unique thing that is. You can subscribe to those emails in the show notes. Also, come hang out with us on Facebook at the Productive Pastor community. Just give it a search. There's a link in the show notes to it, but that's where over 1,000 pastors are gathered together to talk about healthy ministry through strategic productivity. So that's it for this episode. I'm Chad, and I will see you around the internet.